Good to go. Excellent. Okay, the time is now 7:02 p.m. on Monday, May 12th, and I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Environmental Advisory Committee. Okay, and I'll start off with a land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work, traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgia Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us here to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Right. So before we start with the approval of the agenda and so forth, I thought there would be some advantage given that the committee has only met, this is the second time that the committee has met, and there's quite a few people that we just do a quick round, and that includes the people on screen, just to so that we're familiar with everybody, and for the advantage of myself, but also the committee clerk as well too. So I'm Ken Turriff.
I'm Julia Shipcott, committee counselor, council committee coordinator.
And I'm Lita David.
Alain Goodin. Victor Carvalho. Jason Jeff. Over.
Natalie Keel.
Wendy Garrett, visiting member.
If you have a visiting non-member.
Sorry.
Angela Dix.
Okay, and please, for people joining us, these of you through Zoom.
Yeah, hi, I'm Janice Ashworth. I'll be presenting.
And I'm Sean.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right. So may I please have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services?
Oh.
Okay, and is this a second? Okay. And just show hands. Actually, any discussion on those? Okay, show of hands of everyone that agrees. And anybody that doesn't, motion carries. Okay. So any declarations of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none, receipt of the minutes. So the Environmental Advisory Committee meeting minutes of February 24, 2025, seems like such a long time ago, and there's snow on the ground. May I please have a motion to receive the minutes of February 24th, 2025, our first meeting. Angela? Seconder? Right. Okay, any questions or discussions? Things that omissions, anything that needs to be added? Oh, seeing none, all in favor? Okay. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, I think we're unanimous, so that carries. We have no declarations this evening, so in terms of matters for consideration, we have one matter for consideration this evening, a memorandum from the Program Manager, Energy and Environment regarding the Home Energy Retrofit Program Feasibility Study Update. I think we'll discuss that. So first, we do have a presentation from Janice Ashworth, who joins us on the screen. She is a senior consultant with the Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors. So welcome, Janice. You have 10 minutes. If you need more, that's I think that's absolutely fine, actually. So go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. Just to clarify, what do you have other things on your agenda tonight?
We do not.
Okay, this might
So,
take more than 10
actually-
minutes. I thought I had a bit more time
Yeah.
than 10.
Yeah, no.
Favor-
That's just in my script, but it's,
Okay, okay.
conceivably, if you need considerably more, that's absolutely fine, actually.
I
as
do
long
have
as-
a 10-minute version for council, but I prepared a bit more detail for you folks because I thought you might want to get into some more depth. So I'll start with that and we
Absolutely.
can. Okay, perfect. Can you all see my screen okay? And just the cover screen right now?
Yeah.
We're going to be getting into more detail about the Home Energy Retrofit Loan Program. You've seen me present here before, but no need for introductions. I'm with Dunsky Energy and Climate, working closely with Natalie on designing this program. We wanted to give you an update of where we're at now with the feasibility study. It is just about finished, and we'll be taking a very similar presentation to the committee of a whole in early June. So you're getting sort of a sneak peek here. And their version will be the 10-minute version. Yours is the more detailed version. Okay, there we go. Okay, that slide is advancing for you.
Yep.
Good. Okay, great. So just as a bit of a recap, we're here talking today about the Home Energy Retrofit Loan Program, the feasibility study. The objectives of that program are to reduce emissions and enable broad participation in reducing in energy retrofits of the low-rise housing stock within Aurora. So today we're going to give you an update of the study. We'll discuss the recommendations and seek your input on the report, and then we'll also get your input to inform the next steps on the remaining budget for this study. So why are home energy upgrades a priority? We know that Aurora has targeted 80% greenhouse gas reductions by 2050. And we know that across Aurora, homes account for 37% of all emissions. And so in order for Aurora to meet their reductions, their emissions target, they need to really reduce those emissions coming from the residential sector. And those primarily are due to natural gas and water heating, natural gas use for space and water heating within homes. The challenge then is that currently only about 1% of Aurora homes are a retrofit on an annual basis. And that needs to increase to about 4%. So we need to be reducing emissions in about 800 units per year. And that's with a really greenhouse gas focused reduction, not just sort of general home improvements, but really focusing on the emission side. The main barriers that we've heard from homeowners when we've done surveys and had discussions is that they are lacking knowledge about the solutions and they find the upfront costs to be a barrier. So this is kind of just an agenda for today. We'll spend about 15 minutes on the local context. If you warrant me this time, we were going to get into a discussion about the program model options, and then have sort of a wrap up with next steps. The whole thing should take about 45 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, I do apologize for the miscalculation of 10 minutes, but you have all the time that you need, so.
Okay, perfect. And we can skip over some things that I'm sure are I'll go through some of this relatively quickly. I'm sure, this group is fairly well aware that across Aurora, most of the homes are single-family detached homes, about 2/3. And most of those homes have been built since the 1980s. So, relatively new housing stock and relatively low-rise and detached. Again, also across Aurora, we see that space heating accounts for most of the energy use in the homes. Water heating is the next sort of largest chunk. And then when it comes to emissions or energy use, it's predominantly natural gas for both that space heating and for the water heating. And then electricity is the next biggest energy use, and that would be for appliances, lighting, and cooling as well, air conditioning units. Here we can see that most homes across Aurora are owner occupied, with only about 19% being rented out. Homeowners typically fall in the range of 35 to 64 years old. And Aurora has fairly high incomes relative to the Ontario average. So we do see fairly well, communities who are doing relatively well compared to their provincial counterparts financially. Geographically, there's a couple of parts of Aurora that are older. This map on the left shows the heritage districts. This is from the city's own community improvement plan. So those pink shaded areas are older homes, heritage districts. On the right, you see a map showing where there is a higher risk of energy poverty. So that blue sort of almost rectangle in the middle relatively is higher risk of energy poverty in Aurora. So those are two different distinct sort of communities that you could think of different solutions than the sort of blanket average that I mentioned on this slide, where we have relatively higher incomes and relatively newer homes. Here we're seeing a bit of a different story depending on the geographic nature of the city. Aurora also has considerations for climate adaptation. So you're experiencing higher temperature averages and more extreme heat days. You're experiencing more heavy precipitation events and more risk of flooding. You're also seeing higher severe weather events like strong winds and lightning storms. So in order to sort of to combine your mitigation efforts with your adaptation efforts, so on the mitigation side, we mean, reducing emissions, reducing our impact on climate change. On the adaptation side, we mean adapting to what is happening as a changing climate. There's some nice overlap in the middle where, heat pumps, which add air conditioning, can help adapt to those extreme heat days. Building envelope improvements can help keep the heat or cool inside during periods of power outages or energy shortages. And then solar energy plus batteries can be a home solution for power outages and keeping some of those key circuits active. So looking at the role of municipalities in this space, historically we've thought of the province or utilities or even the federal government as playing a role in offering home energy solutions. But the municipalities have a couple of unique tools in their tool belt that can add to this conversation. So one of those is what's called a local improvement charge mechanism. And that's unique to Ontario municipalities, or not only Ontario, but not every province gives municipalities this ability. So in Ontario, it is possible for municipalities to offer financing that is tied to a property, tied to an individual property tax roll, and repaid on the tax roll for improvements on energy efficiency and renewable energy specifically. So only for those two use cases. And that allows the municipality to offer loans that they can, that they can extend to their residents at the terms that they borrow for, which are typically longer terms at lower interest rates than are available to individuals. And also by tying it to the property, that then allows homeowners to think long-term and to think sort of, some of those long-term investments that perhaps might have paybacks that extend beyond when they expect to stay in the home. Can those benefits and then that liability to repay can pass through to the next homeowner because it's tied to the tax roll and not to the individual. So that can help, with this long-term view for home energy upgrades. Municipalities also have the ability to implement bylaws related to climate change. That's a quite wide-reaching authority within Ontario that has been given to municipalities, but many Ontario municipalities haven't yet utilized that authority that they've been given. So it's a bit untested at this point. They do not have the ability to regulate equipment performance standards, however, as we're seeing some municipalities in British Columbia do, like Vancouver, where they do have different authorities. So just kind of keeping that clear. But what municipalities in Ontario can do is require building labeling requirements, like emissions labels, for example. And they can also require emissions standards. So, buildings must adhere to a certain emission standard by certain dates. And we're seeing that more and more on the commercial building side, not as much on the residential building side so far, but increasingly across North America, we're seeing building performance standards or emission standards applying to the existing building space, not just new construction, but existing buildings. And then finally, the last tool in the toolbox for municipalities is their connections and their reputation. They're well trusted by residents across the city. They interact on a daily basis with residents through like libraries and rec facilities, their transit systems, and so on. So there's lots of capacity for the municipality to communicate and share expectations across the region. As we were doing our research, we came across some market barriers and some of the solutions. So, confusion navigating the many programs in market. We talked about that last time at this table. So we think there's solutions around like an energy an online platform and an energy coach hotline. Some of the existing programs have narrow eligibility criteria. And so, there needs to be a platform that supports people to navigate those programs and find the ones they're eligible for. Many have inadequate support for the most effective measures for reducing emissions, like heat pumps. So again, we need a program that avoids those dead-end pathways. Has anyone here heard of the term dead-end pathway? No, okay, I'll explain this. It's I like this little image in the bottom corner here. It shows that, you can seem to be making progress, that mountain on the left, it feels like you're making progress, but then you realize that that your mountain ends before, it's the false peak, it's not the full summit. And so what we want to try to steer people towards is a pathway that's going to actually allow them to get to that long-term target, that 80% emissions reduction, or net zero is another, common target. So the dead end pathway might be something like a more efficient natural gas boiler or natural gas furnace that is making emissions reductions in the short term, but ultimately ties you into still using natural gas as a fuel beyond the deadline when you need to be at a more at a deeper energy or emissions reduction. So it might get you 20% of the way, but you need to be at your 80% reductions target. And so there needs to be, you need to be on that pathway that allows you to get to that full reduction target. We know that some barriers are experienced more for folks through an equity lens. So those who have have other vulnerabilities might experience different barriers, like maybe they're not able to access information online. So maybe a phone line is more appropriate. Maybe language is a challenge, like English might be not their first language. So having materials or staff who can communicate in different languages could be helpful. They might have limited time to implement retrofits. So having a coach or someone who can really step in and hold their hand through the process can be helpful. They might lack trust in contractors or not feel confident negotiating with contractors. And again, that energy coach or that training might be helpful. And they might have limited access to credit. So again, tying that loan to the property can help because it's not on an individual's credit score. And also, so can bridge financing be something that is a barrier to those who have limited credit. So maybe having a solution for bridge financing, which we'll discuss later in the presentation, might be helpful. We have completed a homeowner survey. We talked about that at the last meeting here. We've heard some key takeaways from that survey is that, the motivations for folks is to save money, improve comfort in their home, and reduce their environmental footprint. The barriers they experience are that they're really not aware of the current incentive programs. There's a pretty low percentage of folks who actually are familiar with the provincial and the federal programs that have been in market for a while now. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. And that there was some suggestion of preferred features of a financing program if the city or if the town is going to move ahead with that, like no penalties for early repayment and low monthly payments. So some of the key takeaways were, education campaigns, an online platform, and some sort of tool to help people scenarioize and run the business case would be helpful. The energy coaching service we thought would help solve or help navigate many of these barriers. And an incentive program would also, of course, help. We also did some interviews with some of the external stakeholders who are key. So York Region, Newmarket, Electra, Enbridge. We spoke to all of them. York Region. So just kind of again in confidence within this room for now, because York Region is still working on their specifics, but they are working on. Or they've applied for some funding that they hope will allow them to launch a program that would really help. We could really dovetail with an Aurora program. And so if they're successful, we might not know until later this summer. I think the time has shifted a bit since spring of that's written here, but I think it's delayed because of the election, perhaps. But that might run for 3 years. So that would be an excellent thing for the market generally across the region, and that Aurora could benefit from. Newmarket also in confidence is working on launching a loan program within just the lower tier region of Newmarket. Again, they're waiting to hear back from a funding application, and that would be an interesting collaboration potentially. Electra is working on some support for residential customers to reduce their energy bills and do some peak shaving. It may have an emissions lens to it, but they weren't willing to commit to that one way or the other yet. And then, of course, in Enbridge, we know Enbridge that they launched in the home renovation savings program in January, and that's available across the province. And so that gives rebates on things like insulation, heat pumps, some other energy saving windows, other energy savings measures. They might also support municipalities with some of their program design or program delivery. We spoke with the Senior Center, the Contractor Association, and we spoke to this group, of course, a few months ago. Senior Center said that they'd be willing to help do some outreach to the seniors, the community of seniors that they speak to, and they felt like that community was quite interested in environmental benefit and didn't really know the connection with their homes and their energy use at home. So they thought some education there would really help. The Contractor Association assured us that access to skilled trades is not a limitation across the GTA region, including Aurora, and they're already offering some training on net zero techniques to their members. So that seems to be sort of taken care of, which is nice. It's funded through the City of Toronto and covers a broader region. And then you folks last time, you really suggested that we not replicate existing programs in market, and that you thought the energy coach service would be helpful. You also suggested that we target old homes, but keep it open to all to benefit from, and that the town consider policies to drive more efficient homes for new construction. So using a stick approach rather than a carrot for that new construction. Those were the kind of takeaways from our meeting last time. We also have been convening meetings with an internal review committee of Natalie and her colleagues. Had some good feedback there. We found that the town has limited staff capacity or expertise in delivering a loan program or using the local improvement charge mechanism. So they felt like that was a bit of a too heavy of a lift for them to take on at this time. We spoke to some of the staff working on the equity issues, and they really felt like seniors, newcomers, and the gender equity communities were of focus. They felt that libraries were a good channel to reach those communities. The building permit department, they do communicate with contractors and homeowners, but really about the codes requirements and not really about energy retrofitting. Just to sort of get a sense of what programs are already in market, this is our roundup of programs in market. This is the Ontario, specific Ontario programs. That one at the top is really the most attractive right now. That's the one that launched in January. It's delivered both through Enbridge for Enbridge customers and through Save On Energy for those who are not on the natural gas grid. And it really offers rebates for a number of different things, for space heating, for mechanical systems, for solar, for batteries, for insulation, windows, doors, that kind of thing. So that's a really great program. It doesn't have a very significant rebate for heat pumps, however, so especially for folks who are connected to the gas line, which most Enbridge or most Aurora residents are. So that's not as attractive. And then there's some other specific programs that are tailored to income qualified folks. So Enbridge's winterproofing program and the energy affordability program, they offer some free solutions for folks who are qualified through income qualifications. At the federal level, there's again an income qualified program that really supports people to get off oil, to switch their oil furnace to a heat pump. So that one is quite attractive, offering up to $10,000 for folks who are income qualified. There's also the Canada Greener Homes Loan. So this is the one that's kind of most in competition with a loan program that the town might deliver. So that's still in market today and has been, extended to 2027 as far as we're aware. It's offering 0% interest, loans up to $40,000 for 10-year terms for all sorts of energy efficiency measures. So that's a program that we found many Aurora residents were not familiar with. And so, promoting that program might be really valuable because it is already offering pretty attractive financing. However, it's not, it does require that you have bridge financing because it does take a long time for the loan checks to be mailed out, and they only pay at the end of your retrofit. So you have to sort of be able to float the cost for up to 6 to 9 months, and not everyone can do that. And then there's this new program that's been announced, but not yet. The details are still to be announced. So this is specifically for secondary suites, offering up to $80,000 for folks who want to add secondary suites to existing homes, and that's at an interest rate of 2%, 15-year term. So kind of related. It's a bit adjunct, but still in this sort of intensification and related to energy savings. So keep your eyes peeled for that. This is the market transformation curve that I always like to kind of think about as I'm imagining, how to sort of influence the market. So when we think about market transformation, it's often thought about in 4 stages where each one builds on the other, right? So education and outreach is kind of your foundation. So you'd educate your community, your target audience, give them the tools that they need to understand what the goals are. And then capacity building, that's often more specific training. So maybe training contractors or electricians about net zero techniques. Some of the stuff that City of Toronto, for example, is offering, some of those courses to the contractor unions. Stage 3 then is incentives. So, pulling people along by rebates or carrots, as we often think about. And then stage 4 is more where the sticks come in, and that's regulations, things like bylaws or provincial regulations, or at the federal level too. So the reason that they build on each other is, it's easier to sell some of those sticks if there's the carrots in place before, right? If there's the sort of mass understanding. And you can also imagine a bit of a bell curve where, you've got your early adopters who will move just with some education and outreach. Then you've got your kind of mushy middle who need a bit of incentives to move the market. And then you've got your final laggards who, you really have to regulate to get them to do what you're looking to do. But you want to kind of move the bulk of that bell curve first before you get to the sticks portion. That's typically how, market transformation is rolled out. So with that framing, if we then look at the programs that are either in place already or proposed, like the York Region one, I find it helpful to kind of map those onto those market transformation steps. So, really that education and outreach piece there might be a good chunk of that covered by the proposed York Region Greener Homes program, if that comes into market. So that would be a nice piece to add. They're suggesting that energy coaching may not be available for free. They might have to charge a fee for those who can afford. They might only offer it for free for low income. But more details yet to be seen on what happens there. The capacity building piece, like I mentioned, Toronto is funding and is working with the Guild chapter from the Canada Home Builders Association, and offering courses to the contractors about net zero. So that seems to be mostly taken care of. The Canada Greener Homes loan is offering that incentive or that low interest loan, like I mentioned, and will continue to do so for a few years. There's a bit of a gap there. It requires good credit rating and has perhaps an uncertain future, but is still providing a good service across the market. And then on the incentive side, that provincial program is offering those nice grants. Doesn't cover everything, like the heat pumps are not heavily incentivized, and it doesn't cover energy adaptation or resilience, but that is a nice program in market. On the regulation side, there's not much really happening on regulations yet. There's no requirement for home ratings or home labels to be made public. There's no regulations yet in place for existing homes. We then did some modeling of what different retrofit packages might be applicable, and not that these are the only options, but just some samples of sort of things that folks might choose. We modeled all of these based on a gas heated home because we know that gas heating is quite predominant across Aurora. The first package was insulation, so for the ceiling in the basement and replacing the windows. After incentives, that would cost about $9,500. Interestingly, the energy savings are only about 5%, and the greenhouse gas savings only 6%. So thinking about improving your building envelope for an Aurora home is not actually that effective because your homes are already pretty efficient. If they're, built since the 1980s, they already have to meet certain, energy standards. So not as effective as perhaps in an older part of town, this might be more effective. But for your typical home, your insulation is not going to be as helpful. When you start adding a heat pump to that, so just doing the heat pump and the water heater, taking those from a gas fired to then an electric equivalent, an electric water heater, an electric heat pump, and adding solar to offset the electricity cost, you're now looking at an after incentive cost of $27,000, an energy savings of 62%, and a greenhouse gas savings of 92%. So you can almost all the way, you can almost eliminate your GHGs with just these electrification measures, just the mechanical systems. And then if you blend the two, so you do the insulation and you do the heat pump and the water heater, you're now looking at a total cost of about almost 48,000 after incentives. And you're increasing your GHG, your energy savings to 71% and your GHGs to 94%. So a lot better on the significantly better on the energy side, marginally better on the GHG side. But you can see most of those GHG savings come from the heat pump for space heating and the water heater for gas heating. For water heating, to eliminate gas as the fuel. We modeled this across homes and we said, okay, what's the likely uptake of these scenarios, or of retrofits generally across Aurora? We thought of the 13,000 eligible homes that fall into that category of low-rise eligible homes. We would see, 24 to 85 homes per year on average that would be coming through the municipal program if we were to offer a loan program. And that would be sort of above and beyond what the current rate of retrofits are. Okay, that's the end of the local context piece. Any questions on that? You can feel free to ask questions as we go along. Just interrupt and chime in. And then we're going to have a big discussion period at the end. So I don't see any questions just yet. So I'll keep rolling. Oh, yeah, one of the.
Oh, wait, there's some questions.
I have some questions.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. I have a few questions. First is, just for clarification, in one slide you said Aurora has homeowners with above average incomes, but the next slide showed that most of the area is covered by energy poverty areas.
It's this blue square in the middle here that is the kind of neighborhood that has the higher risk of energy poverty.
Okay, and what's the formal definition?
Yeah, this is a good question. There isn't really consensus on a formal definition. What I'm pulling from here is one that the Canadian urban sustainability practitioners have proposed, which is that they say on average about 3% of a household income is spent on energy costs. So when that rises above 6%, so double the average, the Canadian average, then that starts to sort of enter into the territory of energy poverty or risk of energy poverty. So you can see that scale at the bottom goes from light green to darker blue, where there's higher risk. So around Aurora, you can see the surrounding area is at higher risk of poverty, but within the municipal boundaries of Aurora, there's just this one sort of rectangle that is the neighborhood that has the highest risk.
Yeah, but the dark green is not that. Isn't the dark green also looks?
Oh, is the
not
picture
great.
not very good on your side? Okay. Can you see my cursor? Can you see where I'm? Oh.
Yeah, I see there's only one blue area, but the dark green area is also not great, right? Because it's from 20 to 24%.
Yeah, and I mean, this is based on StatsCan data, so it's probably not as granular as maybe your data would have. But that's right. The dark green area would be the next area at higher risk, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then on the slide about the role of municipalities, you said that we could potentially work with around labeling and standard performance standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So potentially we could, for instance, request like energy score to be shared during sales and purchase of properties. This is what you were trying to say?
Yeah, that kind of thing municipalities do have the authority to require if it's related to emissions. There has been discussions at the provincial level as well about requiring building labeling at the time of sale. It was discussed back in 2008 and it kind of went quiet since then. That was when Kathleen Wynne's government was in power, and it hasn't been discussed since there was a change of government. But that is something that could be done either at the provincial or at the municipal level.
Got it. Thank you. I have two more questions, if that's okay.
Go for it.
One is, you mentioned energy code quite a few times, and I'm not sure if I understand the full scope of that role. If
Yeah,
you could clarify
it can
that.
be quite varied depending on how it's been deployed. So we can talk about that in the next, that's a perfect segue to the next section.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, my last question is on your slide. One of your last slides about the potential home retrofit options.
This one here.
The next one. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that one.
So you mentioned that there is a potential savings, annual energy savings in terms of percentage, but in terms of dollars amount, how much money are we talking about per year for each of those options? And is there any option without the solar? Because I think solar might be, like, if we had an option with heat pump and water heated without the solar, I would like to see that option as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, I can't run that for you right now. The reason we added solar in for this package or for the 2 electric packages is because it actually helps the long-term financials. It increases the upfront cost, of course, but it helps keep the long-term cost low because that the solar then reduces your cost of electricity by almost half. And so that can help sort of the savings or the financial picture. The solar doesn't contribute very much to the GHG savings. And so it's more from a financial point of view. But yeah, that does add to the capital cost, of course.
Yeah, it's just that, like, from a solar perspective, I know Ontario, Canada is not the best country for that. So I'd like to see if it's actually cost benefit, but I trust you in this.
Yeah, the solar does have a financial return on investment. It actually helps the whole package become have a higher return on investment.
Awesome.
But it's not necessary from a, you could pull any of these things apart, right? You could do just the heat pump or just the water heater. The water heater is very, cost effective to install and has a pretty significant GHG savings. So from a single and from a impact dollar wise, that is probably the best place to go, is just to change your water heater.
And then would you have like an average amount for the annual energy savings, like in terms of dollars?
For a water heater?
For those options, like, do you have any average amount?
I haven't run that here. We could, when we get into the program design piece, we can do more granularity on some of the financials. And, once we figure out which measures we're going to be considering including as eligible in the program, we can do more granularity on that.
Got it. Yeah, because that will help us to understand the payback and everything.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great.
And we did have a couple more hands, actually.
Yeah.
Yes, Janet, I was just curious to know, there are a number of homes that have these retrofits. Do you have any percentage of, have you gotten a percentage of what we do have? Homes that do have retrofits already done?
For Aurora?
In Aurora?
Yeah, well, we have the numbers from Natural Resources Canada. They keep track of all the homes that have gone through the Energide program. That's the federal program they deliver. So that's what we were basing a lot of this off of, was, we figured that's what we calculated the number of 1% per year of homes that are going through that program and making some sort of energy upgrades. Now, what's not What's not, a home just being part of that program doesn't necessarily mean that it is achieving the depth of GHG reductions that you need. But that's where we got that calculation. So for example, the 1% per year of homes equates to, what was that, about 200 homes per year, and that was 2023 to 2024 fiscal year. So that's about how many homes are going through some sort of federal program at this point.
You mentioned the water heater, though. You thought that was a part of it. Everyone in Aurora got a new water heater. Would that offset all the other aspects?
That's a good question. I would have to run some models for that. I mean, I think it would be a pretty effective greenhouse gas reduction measure. But how to implement that would be interesting. We haven't modeled that as one of our scenarios, Natalie. We could maybe take
yes, there are scenarios. I'm just picking up on something that Victor had said, because there's a number of programs out there. Like you can get the solar panels, you can get the new water heater, you can get the high efficiency furnaces. I know a number of people who've done one or of those, and I'm just wondering which one is the most efficient to help reduce. And
I mean, the biggest chunk of emissions can be accomplished through a heat pump. That's where your biggest reduction, because if we look back at this, let me just move back a slide or two. If we look back at this breakdown here, within a home, this screen on the left, you can see within a home, about 2/3 of your energy is being used for space heating. And that's predominantly done through natural gas in Aurora. And then about, it says 18%. So that's another, 1/5 is used for water heating. So again, and that's done through natural gas. So the emissions from a home are predominantly coming from the dark blue and then the light blue. If you replace that dark blue with a heat pump, then you're effectively eliminating those emissions, 2/3 of emissions. If you replace your water heater with an electric, you're effectively eliminating 18% of your emissions. The reason I suggested water heaters is because they're a lot cheaper to install than a heat pump. Water heaters are about $1,000. Maybe if you get them installed, it's $1,500 with an electrician. The heat pump is going to be, 10 times that, right? 15,000-ish. And so that's why I think the water heater is going to be an easier thing to sell and reduce 20% of emissions. And then, as you can build up traction, some folks will be ready to go for the heat pump, but it would likely be at the time that their furnace is coming to the end of life, or maybe their air conditioner needs replacement. Like, it makes sense to do that at the asset replacement time to make those costs more abordable. Sorry, I'm speaking in French, but to make those more achievable, right?
Thank you.
And Angela.
Hi, our household, when we were doing our renovation, replaced our hot water tank, which was quite old and inefficient, with an endless hot water tank that's powered by gas. And we had significant savings in terms of heating the water because we weren't heating it all the time. So now you're saying to replace an endless hot water tank powered by gas with an electric one again. So what are the costs of an electric water heater again when you're heating the water all the time? It's emissions.
Right, yeah. So you want to pick an electric water heater that's...
It's not a cost saving. And for the household, it's not a cost saving.
Right. So here's the classic sort of challenge that we have in North America generally, and Ontario is no exception, but that natural gas is a very cheap fuel. But it's not clean. It's high emissions, but it's cheap. So it's really hard to convince people not to use it. But our electric system in Ontario, we're lucky to have a very, low emissions electric system. So if our goal is GHG reductions, it's better to get people over on the electric grid than it is to have them on natural gas. Those tankless heaters they do help save the energy of heating water when you're not using it. However, they're hard to have an electric option because it requires such a huge amount of energy all at once that your peak load would be quite a lot. So you'd end up sort of having to install you might have to install a new service entry, or you might need a higher higher service capacity in order to be able to pull that much at once. So the more cost effective and energy effective solution is to have a well insulated tank that is electric hot water tank. You can get electric heat pump water heaters, which is also a really interesting option. That can reduce the electricity needed, but it is a higher upfront capital cost. So those run maybe $2,500 versus maybe $800 for the standard hot water tank. But they do have a lower electricity usage over their lifetime. So it can be something worth looking at to compare.
I just think you're gonna have a really hard time telling people to replace their gas water heater that is saving them money and spend money on a new electric water heater that's gonna cost them more each month. I think that's gonna be a really hard sell.
Yeah, it's
Because I know
the
water-
numbers. I mean,
I
the
wouldn't do
water
it. I
heating
mean,
is-
I love the environment and all, but I wouldn't do it. It's just too much. I mean, especially if you have to spend another $800 and then you know you're gonna spend an extra $50-$60 a month on the energy as well.
Yeah, so it's always a good thing to catch people at the end of the asset life. So when they have to replace that unit anyways, then they're making the choice between buying a new one or putting in, making the choice at that point. But I think, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head that the dead end solutions is a real challenge, right? So because you've already invested in this tankless hot water heater, it's very difficult to convince you to go a different route at this point because you've already just made that investment. It's hard to sort of move away from that technology. Other folks who haven't yet made that investment are going to be at an easier place in their decision journey. But arguably, like a natural gas on-demand hot water heater is a good example of a dead-end solution, that it still ties you to the natural gas energy case for 20 years or for the life of that asset, right? And that 20 years takes us almost to the end of when you need to be at your 80% emissions reductions. So we need to there's only really one more asset renewal cycle that we have within homes to be able to convert them to non-dead end solutions.
Yeah, I understand. But it's just that like any tank water heater you're gonna run into the same problem that if you have 2 kids at home and 2 adults and you all want to have showers at the same time and you've got a 40-gallon tank and the last person gets a cold shower. Whereas with a tankless hot water tank, that never happens. So that's gonna be
for that
another-
number of occupants, a 60-gallon is probably more common.
Mhm.
40-gallon you might run out. Yeah.
Sorry, do we have any more questions before we move on to the program model? I just want to go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to follow up on what Angela was saying, because I also have a tankless water heater. And our gas is much lower. We also have we've had to replace our furnace, so we replaced it with a high efficiency furnace as well. But even when we did that, significantly, we have not used as much gas.
Yeah. So you can achieve sort of some of those savings in the short term, but like I explained before, like those are ultimately those systems will need to be changed before the emissions reduction target is met. And so there needs to be some solution for, replacing assets that are on fossil fuels. And I guess that might beg the question then, what's the option for a renewable natural gas solution? That is something that is being discussed. All the models and the literature so far, the research is showing that yes, there is a potential to make renewable natural gas, but the solution or the availability of it is typically only about 10 to 15% of the current gas load. And there are some, industrial loads or other loads that really that don't have an electric alternative. So saving that very limited renewable natural gas supply for those alternative loads is going to be the most effective, systems approach. So things like, industrial solutions or industrial needs, or even sort of long distance transportation. It's really difficult to find an electric solution for airplanes or long distance shipping, for example. So they need some sort of fuel for that the renewable natural gas market or renewable fuels market might be able to solve. The other option that you might be hearing about is, putting hydrogen in place of natural gas in the existing pipes and running your systems, your equipment on hydrogen. That is also potentially a possibility, but hydrogen takes electricity to produce if you're making green hydrogen, not making it from fossil fuels to begin with, like natural gas, it requires a fair bit more electricity than just using that electricity directly to heat the water or to run a heat pump. Heat pumps are about 300% efficient versus, creating hydrogen from water using electricity is about 60-70% efficient. So you can see the difference in efficiencies, that you would just need a lot more, electricity generation if we ran our equipment off of hydrogen. So that's kind of the crux that systems thinkers and municipalities have to toil with is, they have to look at it from a systems point of view, not just from an individual home point of view, and try to steer people towards the most effective solution at the systems level. Cost effective.
I have two more questions. I see that Shengchen, but I want to give the floor right now to Councillor Wendy Gardner before we.
No.
So you want to?
Maybe the committee.
Okay, so let's do Shengchen. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say thank you, Jess, for showing what you've shown so far. I think the section around dead-end pathways was actually a really, really good point. I think it's worth highlighting that particular section when we're talking through the slides, especially with the natural gas water heaters. I think that's the perfect example of one of those dead-end paths that would get us to a false target. So sort of a point of feedback being, I think that's worth highlighting. It's a fantastic example, and for me, it resonated quite well as a resident who recently replaced their water heater with a gas one. If I sort of knew ahead of time, I probably, because I felt pretty good going with a high energy, like a high efficiency gas water heater, but sort of clearly I made the wrong call there and went the wrong path. So I think it's worth highlighting.
Yeah, I'm not trying to sort of make anyone feel guilty here. We have, but I can explain from my personal situation. We did change a gas on-demand water heater for an electric one, and it solved a couple problems. And one was that the on-demand took a long time for the hot water to get to our shower on the second floor, and we wasted a lot of water just running till running the cold until the hot would arrive. So it's saved us a lot of water in addition to the greenhouse gases. I think there was another councillor or a question from the councillor on the floor. Yeah.
Thank you. I know this is coming to council, so I have a couple of suggestions before it comes. The slide that says unique for the municipality, it's page 10. So I think there should be some idea of what this would cost the municipality, because from what I can understand, you're suggesting that the municipality finance through a low interest loan. Am I correct, John? We're
going to be getting into the specific options for models in the next section here. Yeah, we've got some costing scenarios.
So that would be, I think we'd have to have an idea, maybe speak with finance or Natalie, find out, because council can't make a decision if we don't have financial parameters.
The cost will be included. I think Janice is going to go over some of that in this next section.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you.
The other thing is bylaws, and maybe Natalie, or you can look into this. I've been on council for 21 years, and I don't know of any bylaws that it says municipalities can implement bylaws regarding building emissions, such as building labeling and performance standards. I've never heard of that. I don't think we have anything like that. So maybe some more information before it comes to the council on that one.
Yeah, it's definitely a new, it's a bylaw authority that hasn't been used very often. It was brought in 2012 to the Municipal Act, and To date, there's not been very many municipalities across Ontario that have used that authority, but it is in section, I think it's 10.25 or 10.52 of the Municipal Act that gives council that, gives municipalities that authority within Ontario.
And I think that's fantastic. I mean, what a great idea. I don't know if the building department knows about it. So, yeah, anything that we can do. Also with the green building standards, I don't think they're gonna do that much, at least in the short run. That may be something the council gets a follow-up report on.
Yeah, the green development standards are a couple years in, and there's plans to revise it to see where how effective it is and any areas for revisions. Late next year. So it is being worked on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for anybody, the most efficient way, the best thing to do to save energy is to have good windows and insulation. I mean, that's just best practices. And the other thing is white roofs or light colored roofs, anyway. And I don't think I don't think those three things are in the cards for the next several years. So it may be something that if we're going to ask people, I know there's something about insulation here, but if we're going to be giving information to the public, and I think there is financing for windows, that really is the best way, plus the insulation.
So, I mean, Janice was just showing how a lot of Aurora homes currently are 1980 and newer, and they actually have a fairly good level of windows and insulation, and that to the most effective measures that she's suggesting from this study is not necessarily focusing just on that insulation piece, because they're actually decent for the most part of our building stock, but focusing on those natural gas equipment in the building stock would have the biggest impact in terms of GHG. That's yeah, exactly. So that focusing on those insulation measures, that first column, doesn't have that much of a GHG impact. 6%. But if we focus on pumps and the water heaters and electrifying them, we see a 92% GHG reduction. Mind you, it is a bigger cost, but you do.
But that can be brought down with the solar, right?
Yeah.
If you take the solar out of that package, you would have be about $10,000 less, $12,000 less.
Yeah, so at this point, we're in this feasibility, right? So we're assessing what are the possibilities and not making any decisions at this point of within the study.
Okay.
We're saying, we're trying to understand, like the building stock, for example, at this point, what would have the most impact. Any decisions like packages like this, for example, would be decided in the design study phase, which is not this feasibility study. The feasibility study is trying to understand like what is available to the town, what makes the most sense, and what are the financial implications from these different options, right? So that level of detail would then be decided in the design study if we were to go forward with it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thank you. I've just been familiar with passives, like that's where they save the most energy. So it's not only money, it's also greenhouse gases.
Yeah, exactly. And your comment about the green development standards is for new builds, like definitely these types of high insulation building envelope designs is the most important in a new build, right? Going retrofitting at this point is a lot more costly. We don't see the returns like we would if we had it done in the first place.
And you're right, and there's
Yeah.
not a lot, well, there might
Yeah.
be a lot of infill building, but there's not gonna be a lot of pile.
Yeah, so and so in that building analysis, Janice outlined the majority of the building stock is post 1980s, which is good in terms of insulation. There's opportunity potentially to target the older homes for insulation measures where they would see the most return from that investment versus a home from 1990, for example, that already sees quite a bit of insulation. They would see more return on the.
You know, that's a good point, thank you. And you were gonna ask about the blue area on that?
Oh, yeah, Janice, are you able to put that slide with the energy poverty again?
Yeah,
There's a couple of questions related to that. What the
Yeah.
boundary was, like, I don't know if you have this information on hand, or we can kind of beef it up in the final.
take away some questions, yeah.
Yeah, but there's questions on, the darker blue, understanding where the data comes from and how that's calculated, the boundaries in terms of, I believe it's a census area.
Yeah, this is from StatsCan census data, that's right.
Okay.
And I think it's probably, at this point, it might have been the census from 2016, so, there maybe is a more recent version from the more recent census of 2021 that we could try to pull. I can double check if it was the 2016 or 2021 data.
Yeah, okay. Did you have a specific question? You wanted to know the boundaries or how the data was put together?
Yeah, I know, I just wanted to know what the boundaries were and which houses basically are involved. Is it the older houses that are near Fleury Park?
Yeah, there's Matchel, I think.
Matchel and
Yeah,
Fleury and all
back
those
there,
streets,
yeah.
those really old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's based on census data, so it's gonna be what's provided there within the census, right? And then we do a calculation to say, are they spending more than the average in terms of
Yeah.
knowing their income levels? So that's how I believe it's calculated, but
Yeah, that makes
Maybe a
sense, because if we did our house, it was, the furnace would run constantly before
Yeah,
we insulated.
yeah, and I think they even collect data on the homes in terms of repairs and things.
Yeah.
Within the census data, so they can even say, well, this area has a higher than average need of repair.
Yeah.
In addition to, right, so I think all those pieces get put together. In that calculation, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
interesting, because it's not my area, but it's just north of my area, so
Yeah.
I found it quite interesting.
Just, Alan, did you raise your hand earlier, or did you? No, okay, I thought I have that. Anyone else? All right. Angela just made, wants to make a point with regard to something that she pulled up, so go ahead.
It's just that I read an article or heard something that Doug Ford was hoping to expand gas-fired power plants in Ontario. And I know we already have gas-fired power plants, so I'm not seeing like the reasoning to switch everybody from gas, and yet they're still burning gas to produce electricity in Ontario.
Yeah, very fair question for sure. I can take a stab at that if you want, or if someone else wants to take a go at it.
You go ahead.
Okay, sure, yeah. So right now our predominant energy source is nuclear in Ontario, which is low carbon. It provides base load though, and so the challenge that the electricity system operator has is the peakiness of the electricity grid. So the gas plants are typically used for some of that fluctuation. Currently we do have some gas plants in Ontario that provide some of that fluctuation and help regulate or help moderate also some of the renewable generation, which can be variable as well, depending on wind and sun and water availability. We have also a high percentage of hydroelectric in Ontario, around 15 to 20%. Nuclear is 65%, and then gas and then wind and solar would be somewhere in the sort of 5 to 10% range, and gas would make up the balance. The challenge with, so electrifying things right now, it still does, of course, it does financially and from an emissions point of view pay off. And one of the real benefits there is that a lot of those technologies like the heat pumps, again, are about 300% efficient. Does this group understand a heat pump technology? Should I try to explain that a little bit in a in a snapshot? The idea, like 300, how can you achieve 300% efficiency? It seems, too good to be true. It's through pressure. So they use a refrigerant and then pressurize it using electricity to pressurize the refrigerant, which then gives either the heating or cooling direction. So it's the same approach as your refrigerator would. You hear your refrigerator humming, and it's kicking out heat out the backside, but bringing cool inside. That's the same technology as a heat pump. It can do so by pushing cool out of the home, for example, in the winter, and augmenting the heat inside the home at a 300% efficiency using that pumping action, so that pressurizing of a refrigerant action. So that's the ability. That's how heat pumps are able to take 1 kilowatt hour of electricity and make 3 kilowatt hours of heating energy out the other side, or cooling energy. They can do cooling as well. So using that same pumping technology. So then if you think about 1 kilowatt hour of electricity versus, even if it is a gas powered kilowatt hour, it's then augmenting a 300% efficiency, leveraging that 300% efficiency. So you're still getting that sort of overall savings than using that gas in a gas furnace, which doesn't have, which is operating at maybe 85-90% efficient. So that's part of the savings, but then, also we need to be thinking about how we prevent our electric system from adding more gas. And some of the solutions to that is through batteries, which will then provide that peak load balancing, and also through consumption patterns. So things like smart thermostats and allowing the grid operator to shift loads, charging cars at night instead of during the daytime when everything else is trying to also use the load. That's going to help regulate our peak and save us from having to add more gas plants.
Last question for this section from Leanne.
Only because we're talking about gas and electricity. When I say I have a high efficiency furnace, it's actually a heat pump, is what we are talking about. But it still uses gas, auxiliary gas, in the winter when it hits its coldest. So I don't think we can go completely off the gas grid. But we could make it as low as possible, which this heat pump does.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. So that other scenario, that's another option. So it's called a dual fuel option, where you use the heat pump. There's two different sort of categories of heat pumps. One is kind of a mid-range heat pump, which operates maybe down to -12, does it go to -15 perhaps in your area? And then there's a cold climate one, which can operate down to about -26, 27. So there's two different technologies there. The mid-range ones are a fair bit cheaper, but you do need to have a backup system of some sort. And your backup system might be a natural gas furnace, as it sounds like in your case. And that's going to reduce your consumption by quite a lot, because I think in Aurora, your climate zone doesn't go below -12 very often, right? You're not getting really those really cold days for very long. So your gas backup is only operating for maybe a few weeks in the winter, and that's a really great savings from an emission side. And those cold climate heat pumps, I'm in the Ottawa area. That's what we use here, because we do get some of those really cold days. Further north in Ontario, cold climate heat pumps are going to be more and more effective. But in your area, the gas backup ones are going to achieve a fairly significant gas savings. The challenge is then, how do you fully get rid of the gas, right? And what's your solution to the dead end pathway? And so that's something that you have to kind of think about. Maybe at that point you can solve that that backup challenge by adding more insulation and improving your building envelope, so you don't lose as much heat during those few cold snap times, and your heat pump is perhaps able to provide what you need, right? Or maybe you're using a little bit of that renewable natural gas during just those peak times for those peak shavings. But you still have, it can be a good solution, and what you've done is probably an excellent strategy financially and from an emissions point of view. It just leaves a bit of a conundrum of how to fully scrub out those final emissions at some at some future point. So no clear cut, it's clear as mud, right? Clear as mud when it comes to the best approach.
It's good to know that you live in Ottawa and the Ottawa Valley areas. I can totally relate. So
Yeah.
why don't we move on then to the next part is the program model options, and then we can have further discussion based on those. So
Sure,
good
yeah.
stuff.
And just to be clear, we modeled this based on the climate zone for Aurora, not for Ottawa. This is all based on your weather, not where I'm sitting. Okay, so let's jump into the next bit here. So we did pull out some different program model options. We ranked it here by, 1, A, B, and C. So 1, sort of the market support program, we think is the foundational underlying program that will support any of the future options if you choose to add them on. But the market support program focuses on education, awareness. It does not include a loan component, helps Aurora residents partake in the programs that are already in market. So that provincial rebate program and the federal loan program, it kind of steers people towards those through education and support. And then if Aurora does want to add a loan component, they can do so in 3 different ways. That's where A, B, and C come in. The first one here is if we're successful at securing grant funding, predominantly through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as the main lender, then we can look at offering a third-party a loan solution that is delivered by a third-party agent, similar to the way Newmarket is proposing to design their program. So there might be an opportunity to collaborate with them depending on timing. Securing FCM funding, though, is very competitive. It's very difficult to secure that funding. We think that we've actually kind of the timelines of this study don't align with the FCM funding window, which they just said it would close September 1st for this go around. So they've moved that forward from what used to be March 31st. So we're thinking that it's not possible for this round, but perhaps in future iterations of the FCM funding, there might be an opportunity for Aurora to apply at that point. We also then modeled, so the nice thing about the FCM funding is that they offer the loan capital along with a nice grant to help support the cost of delivering the program and fund some of those market support components. The next option B, is assuming that we're not able to get FCM funding and we're looking for to borrow loan capital from the private sector. So the interest rates would be higher, there would be less grant to accompany them. So it's done on kind of a minimal budget. It is possible, but the uptake is likely to be quite a bit less because the rates would be higher and there would not be the same sort of cushion of grant to support delivery and possibly offer incentives or other, supports to take advantage of the loan. The third one here is a very targeted loan program, just offering loans to a very select population. So we thought perhaps seniors or those in need of bridge financing, or maybe those going for net zero solutions or net zero retrofits might be worth targeting. So a more narrow targeted program. If it's much smaller that way, it might be possible for the municipality to deliver it in-house. But there are some costs, there are some challenges here that, a small program doesn't achieve economies of scale. It's going to be more bespoke, so more costly to deliver per unit. And so the impact per cost might be less attractive. When it comes to the market support components, this somewhat fuzzy image, I apologize for that. I'll try to get a higher res version for council, is it can be multifaceted. So there's lots of different options. You can see 10 different things here on the screen of different ways that you can support the market through that don't include a loan but can still be valuable. So general education and outreach, doing sessions at the library perhaps, or doing outreach through flyers, any sort of outreach you can imagine is possible there. Newsletters, working with the utilities. The energy coach, which we've talked a fair bit about, that can be delivered in a number of different ways. One option might be kind of a hotline where there's someone on the other end who can help answer questions. You could also imagine someone who's trained providing group sessions like webinars or group discussions like an Ask Me Anything like Lunch and Learn, for example. Or you could imagine someone working with specific target communities. Maybe they focus on, houses that are were built in the 1950s, and they say, okay, we're going to specifically target solutions for them, or even the heritage qualified homes, and helping people navigate that complicated, niche of heritage and energy efficiency, and working through some of those challenges. So the coaches can be any number of things. We've seen also online chat boards, like where people post their questions, and then someone who's qualified can help answer those questions. There's lots of different ways. The online one-stop shop solution is one that can also be helpful. So that's a standalone website where folks can find their own, navigate their own solutions without having to have someone on call to respond. So it might provide information about the existing programs, federal, provincial, so on. It might help connect to local contractor networks. It might help with supports on implementation, like what questions to ask your contractors, what questions to ask, how to navigate some of the different supports. There also could be a tool. There's some really neat tools that help provide roadmaps for stage retrofits. That can be part of the online platform, but you see that's the next bullet here. So that can really give people a sense of what's a tailored solution for their home and different scenarios. So maybe they want to plug in, I would like to add insulation to my attic, and I want to add a hot water tank, electric hot water tank, and they can see what the costs might be and what the savings might be, high level, just rough estimates, but gives them a tool to then run some scenarios of what could be the most cost effective. The capacity building piece here, we spoke about that, but that's often, considering training, certifications for contractors or trades or electricians, to help them know more, be able to serve clients better, to serve residents better, because your contractors really are also your salespeople. They're the voices, or they're the place where homeowners turn to for advice. So working through them can be very valuable. Adding in resiliency measures or climate adaptation measures into sort of any of these other tools can be helpful to help people, hit that target or that overlap between emissions reductions and becoming more resilient to climate change. Then, bulk procurement. This is an interesting one. Toronto, I think, is the furthest along in trying to navigate reductions from suppliers by ordering in bulk. I would suggest that we connect with them if we were looking to explore that, because I think you do need a larger market to make that possible. And, given that you're quite close in proximity to Toronto, there could be an opportunity there. Incentives and rebates, of course, this is everyone's favorite, offering free money for certain outcomes, easy to do, hard to fund, hard to financially make that sustainable, but everyone loves it if you can find the funds for that. Virtual home assessments and energy ratings. This is another interesting piece. It kind of can couple with that bylaw capability, offering virtual home assessments and getting those home energy ratings or home emissions ratings. Using a virtual technique can be a big cost savings. Right now, an in-home energy audit costs about $600 for someone to show up and do an audit of your home. Some of these virtual audits can be done for $1 a home, for example. That the municipalities have been rolling out those kinds of solutions. In Durham region, they have done this for every home in their region, and they allow homeowners to see their own ratings and see some of the potential scenarios or some of the potential retrofit solutions for them. So that is something that could be done, and it can be made either public or just private. So those energy ratings or those home ratings could be made public so everyone can see what the ratings are. And just the homeowner can get some of the more detailed, granular details of how to reduce, or they can be fully private the way they've done it in Durham so far, which is only the homeowner, once they prove that they're the homeowner by having their, tax roll number, can access that rating and see the solutions for their home. So it can be public or private, depending on how you prefer to roll it out. The public, making them public, of course, has more of an influence on things like, the market transformation. But having it private can also can still help with the education side. And then we talked about emissions performance standards a bit for residential buildings. That's not yet, haven't seen that yet done by any municipalities in Canada, but it is possible in Ontario that you can set emissions standards such that everyone has to achieve certain reductions. We're seeing in Vancouver, for example, they're setting emission standards for homes over $3 million, valued over $3 million. So first they're targeting kind of the higher value homes to have that equity spin on it, and requiring that those homes do their emissions reductions before the others are required to. So my question back to you on this slide is, which of these components seems most important to you, given what you know about your local context?
So let's open up, you're willing to open up the floor to entertain questions on this?
Yeah, I'd love to hear thoughts from the floor.
Yeah, anybody, certainly let's go ahead.
Hi, Jen. So it looks like, from my understanding, 3 options: the online one-stop shop, the roadmap for staged retrofits, and the virtual home assessment could all complement each other. Like one website could potentially have all those 3 points. So I think
that could be done all together. You're right.
Yeah, that's an interesting synergy to consider. The emission standards, I think, as Councilor raised, might be very interesting option as well. And as you mentioned, the bulk procurement might also be interesting to explore. And obviously, like outreach and education seem like the core of this space, if I understood correctly. And I'm not sure about the incentives and rebates. You mentioned everyone loves free money yet, but at the same time, it kind of feels like it cannibalizes with the concept of the loan program we are actually trying to design. But yeah, those are my thoughts and inputs.
Yeah, you're bang on to say that those 3 pieces are often done together. For example, what they developed in Durham, the V-Heat platform is basically the culmination of, or the combination of those 3 pieces: the online one-stop shop, the roadmaps, and the virtual home assessments are all sort of combined in that V-Heat platform. And if York Region is successful in their application to, for funding, they might actually launch that across the whole region. So those 3 pieces might be taken care of for us by the region. And it would leave some of and that also contributes, so that can be a very useful tool for your education and outreach, right? You would then be promoting or marketing that this online tool exists, and you would be sending people there as part of your education program.
Just
Go ahead.
do you have would you be able to give us an idea of how much each of those options would cost?
Yeah, we can. I think we've done some modeling of that. I mean, I would suggest that what I've seen is that this kind of one-stop shop, or the virtual audits and roadmaps, that's about $1 a home is what I've seen as kind of an average. Now, that's typically a larger municipality than just Aurora, so that you might have a higher dollar per figure per residential building, because you're a bit smaller. But if you're able to collaborate across the region, that might be what you expect. Education and outreach can be very scalable, right? You can do some things that are totally free, just leveraging your current municipal communications channels, maybe some posters in libraries, or you can do things that are obviously much more expensive through paid advertisement spots or banners, posters. There's a whole range of things there. Energy coaching, again, can be scalable. It's not the cheapest solution I would expect, but it depends if you're offering sort of group sessions or if you're offering sort of a call anytime hotline. Think about a salary for one person for a whole year would probably be a hotline cost, right? To have that hotline available. Capacity building, those trainings, I think I've seen quotes of, $10,000 to $15,000 to deliver a series of courses. And I think, the emission standards, that's going to be more of a regulatory piece. The neat thing about coming back to that market transformation curve, the education support and incentives, and then, regulations. From a municipal lens, regulations are quite cheap to implement. They're harder to sell politically, right? Incentives are the most costly one. They're more expensive, but everyone loves them. So it depends kind of how courageous you want to have the council you've got, and how courageous you can be politically. If you have to weigh that balance. Do you want to spend money to be publicly, to do things that are going to be publicly attractive, or are you willing to use the regulatory levers that you have and maybe have to sort of get more buy-in from your residents on that? So it's challenge that municipalities face. Do they have money or do they have political courage? I guess is the trade-off there.
We have two more hands, Ellen, and then Leda.
Thanks to the chair. Thanks, Janice, for the information. For me, the current cost of owning a home for people, everybody sees it rising. So I'd say the incentive is probably very important, but I think it needs to be married with education. So we need to show people what they're getting and why we're giving them incentives. So I think for me, those are the two biggest pieces in the program.
That's a good sort of standard. Yeah, giving people incentives, but also the rationale for why. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that feedback.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of a combination of the two of you. I do feel that really you need to be able to sell it. That's the main thing is why, but important now you're speaking to the converted here because we all, feel that it is important for the environment. But it has to be efficient for them and it has to be easy to get to. So that's why a roadmap is really, really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So the selling point is important. And there has to be that outreach and education. And there has to be a reason for them to do it. Okay, that incentive program, it has to be beneficial to them as well, be it financial. But at the same time, I think there's also something that we should be selling to council or to our elected officials is that I think we all should be also targeting the new builds. The new builds should have the building energy giving contract to the developers who are showing the energy efficient technology in their new builds, and maybe an incentive for them to build.
Yeah, and that might be an interesting part of your bulk procurement too, if you can couple the new builds with your existing housing stock to achieve more scale.
But with respect to, if we can, I think we talked about this before, getting people, like just before they buy the new furnace or anything like that, if they know about these programs beforehand, because we all know it. The lifespan of certain things are 10, 15 years, and you're going to have to buy a new furnace or a new stove or whatever, a new dishwasher. So it is to get them before they actually get there. And that's why I think even having contractors, like when you have to apply to the town for any type of renovations. If you're doing a renovations, you're probably doing something that needs some appliance that needs to be energy efficient. So
working
again,
for the
that
building
tailored
permit department.
Yeah. So that tailored, that sort of, it's that pathway, that roadmap, I think is probably important in all these scenarios, as well as the selling point.
Yeah, giving people to make those long-term plans, to budget for it. Yeah, and to think about it before some asset needs replacement urgently, right? When you're walking towards a solution, it can be an easier one to plan for than when you're thrown into overnight.
I would like to know if I'm going to be doing a renovation or looking for something. I like to be able to go to a qualified contractor that's going to give me, but I don't have to go ask my neighbor, what contractor did you use? That having contracts that have already been approved would be good to have.
Mm-hmm. Contractor list, perfect.
We have two more hands, Angela, and then Councilor Dick.
Hi. I just obviously the population is growing older as all the baby boomers retire, and
as such, a large population that is in Aurora, that has been in Aurora for a very long time, like myself, 28 years, and you've been in Aurora for a long time. As you transition to retirement, obviously your income is not going to be the same. So I think for a program like this, an incentive program is as far as it should go, because if you start legislating people to spend money when they're on a fixed income, it would be political suicide. I don't think it's in council's parameter that they should be able to legislate people to change their furnaces, et cetera, when they probably can't afford to do it. So as an incentive program, I think it's okay, but I don't think it should be put into bylaw.
Yeah, there needs to be supports for people to be able to be compliant, right? Otherwise, you're setting people up for failure for sure.
Exactly.
That's no way to guide the ship, right?
Yeah. I think you'd get a lot of pushback from people if something like that was implemented.
Sure, yeah.
An incentive thing would be fine. So if they want to do it, they can, but they shouldn't be forced to do it.
Okay, great feedback. Should we move ahead to the next? Oh, were there more questions?
We have two more.
Well, with respect to the building code, council can't ask builders to do anything above what's in the building code. It's a problem. With respect to, I mean, you can't legislate. You can only encourage. And I doubt that we're in a position to give loans. So, I also like the idea of working with the broader community. I don't know if Toronto is right, but I mean, Newmarket seems really farther ahead than we are in some things. Economies of scale, if we could get other communities to work together with us. But from what you said, somebody said the market's not that keen at the moment. But these things, the bylaws, I'd love to know if you could send us a copy of what is actually allowed in the bylaws for a municipality. Thank you. I kind of see you nodding.
Yeah, I can send that over. It's a very, very vague bylaw. It just says municipalities have the authority to do things around climate mitigation and adaptation. It's effectively that broad.
Thank you. And I mean, York, the region of York, hopefully they will get this thing with the Latrobe Ecology Center, because that is a fantastic center. It's going to be a combination of so many things. And it can't be confusing. Confuse someone like me, and especially senior citizens. So it had, which had, but it just has to be as straightforward. I like all the suggestions that have been made, and I appreciate them. So thank you for your work on this. And I guess it's up to presentation at council with the added comments from the committee, or you'll work on the comments from the committee, integrate how, if they can be presented to council.
Yeah, we do have a few more questions for this group. If this is not quite the end of the presentation, so
Sorry, Jonathan, we had Jason, you had your hand up as well too, or yeah, go ahead.
I can wait until the end.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, no worries. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I think we were just going to go through some of the pieces. So if we're going to be applying to FCM for funding, we do need to have some sort of innovative element to make our application stand out. Some of the options that we considered were to pilot a turnkey delivery model. So that's hasn't been done in Ontario yet. It is the approach that Newmarket is proposing, so they might get there first. but the collaboration with them could help. The home ratings and virtual audits, like we've been talking about, those have been done privately, but not yet publicly across in Ontario. So that could be an interesting approach for Aurora to consider and have that sort of drive more folks into the to be having awareness of the value of home retrofits. Connecting your heritage programming and initiatives with energy requirements might also be an interesting local play for Aurora because you've got some heritage programming in place. So where you're offering incentives for folks, maybe you have some green strings or some energy strings attached to those incentive programs. Might be an interesting thing to consider. Let us go through the rest and then we can have an open discussion at the end with, taking all this into consideration. There we go. So we ran a couple of budgets for these. You were asking about the budget. So here's some high level numbers. Just, capital budget would be how much the loan program would cost. So you can see the market support does not have any loan flow through. But it could be quite a range. You could do things for relatively cheap or for a fair bit more if you're offering like incentive programs, for example. So could range anywhere from a couple $100,000 up to a couple million. We thought that the loan flow through amount might range again from 3 to 4.5 million. If you're able to get decent rates from FCM, for example, and then would be about half of that or a bit less than half of that if you're not able to get decent rates from FCM. A targeted program would maybe be a tenth. So maybe $300,000 for, this is kind of for a 4-year program delivery budget is what we typically see. FCM is funding for 4 years. So that's why we've modeled out for 4 years. Okay, so that brings us to the end of kind of the content. The next steps was really just, feasibility study report going to council in June for the June 10th committee as a whole. And then we've got the potential to continue with a program design study that would get into more granularity around one or multiple of these options to really sort of build that out. And that we are anticipating would come back to this group and to council. If we're given the green light to continue with the program design study, we would come back in the fall, October or November, to this group and council with that program design. So any remaining questions, discussion, floor is open. I'm just going to go turn on the lights in this room. It's getting really dark at my end, but I welcome all of your questions.
So typically we would bring it to the floor but because we've been taking questions, and we may just want to see if there is any additional questions, and then I'll refer over to Natalie for any last comments. But do we have any more? Actually, we did have actually a question that's from Jason. You were holding off on the question until the end, so yeah, go ahead right now.
So if I understand this correctly, there would not be a loan program per se. It would just be supporting existing market supports.
Well, I think that's the big question for the committee and council to consider is do you want to include a loan program? Like we have the A, B, C options, which are all loan elements on top of a market support, right? So we'll go back to this slide here. So market support is kind of the foundation, helping move the market along with education and tools. And then, offering a loan if that is what this committee and council deem as appropriate. There are 3 solutions, and the first one there that is perhaps the most attractive might need to wait until FCM opens up another funding window for another call for funding. The other 2 could be pursued in the meantime, but might be have less impact. So it's really kind of a weighing of the cost benefit of whether or not council and committee decide to or direct staff to pursue B and C.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I thought there would be no loan program whatsoever, in which case, but I don't see the point of the feasibility study. Thank you.
Any other questions before? All right. Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, question to you actually, Councillor Gardner.
is that, is there not already a program for the heritage programs where they can get, what it was, I think $20,000?
Just being proposed.
Right, okay.
And so it's gone to staff, and staff is gonna bring a report back to us. There never has been.
There never has been, so, yeah, right, I know there hasn't, but I know it's in the works, or it's being proposed.
Well, it's just being proposed last, getting my months mixed up, in May. I think it might actually have been proposed in April. So it'll take a while to get the staff report back.
Okay. So we in essence could keep it out of this program, right? Possibly. Yes.
Well, thank you, Janice. I have a question here. At the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned that one of the challenges is that we have to reach this target of 800 units per year, so we can meet the GHG targets. I think it was first or second slide. But then just show them us another slide saying the potential impact of this program be around 24 to 85 retrofit projects annually. So it just seemed like too far from that target of 800 units per year.
You're right, yeah.
How can we actually increase the impact with, like, one of the questions I would have is offering the loan help to increase the impact of this program considerably or not?
Well, so just to be clear, that 24 to 85 is just the loan participants. So that would be just the people who would choose to go ahead with a loan program based on, and that's based on what we've seen in other jurisdictions, like the uptake rates of certain programs. It doesn't mean that those are the only buildings doing retrofits. For example, there's already 200 retrofits or so happening per year based on the federal and provincial programs that are in place. So, you might have much higher uptake of like your education services. If you had an online platform, you might see much more uptake of that. For example, in Durham County, in Durham region, they had a energy coaching service and they had a loan option, and they had about 1,300 people go ahead with the energy coaching service and 0 take them up on the loan option, right? Because they found other financing solutions. So this just goes to show, some of those other market supports might be more valuable to folks. And add more sort of value into the market that doesn't fill a gap that isn't already filled.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone before I give it over to Natalie? Just checking my art. Natalie, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just curious if you've taken a look at other municipalities that have implemented LIC loan programs and what sort of interest rates that they were provided at, and if that affected like the uptake and what percentage of uptake.
Certainly. Yeah, we've done a full scan of across the country of different interest rates and different programs, and so predominantly programs are funded through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which offers pretty low interest. The first round of programs were funded at 0% interest. So those ones were very attractive. That money has all sort of moved out. The latest round of funding is at 2.5% from FCM. And so again, pretty attractive. But compared to the federal program, which was launched kind of just a few years ago, which is at 0% as well, hard to compete with that, right? Programs that are funded privately tend to be closer to the 5-6% range interest rates, maybe not as long terms either. Like a lot of the municipally funded or the FCM funded loan programs are offering 20-year terms. A lot of the private ones are maybe 10, max 15 years. Typically. So you're going to have lower uptake of programs that have less attractive terms for the loans, either interest rates or length of time is another factor, and so is the eligibility criteria. Who is eligible for the loans can also be an influence on the uptake.
Just give you sort of like the last kind of.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just want to thank Janice for all her hard work on this project. It's a lot of information. We came into this project not really having a good idea of what's available. You hear about these, you know, the bigger programs that are around the city of Toronto, Ottawa, you know, or regional level programs. And we're coming in as, you know, a medium-sized municipality, you know, it's almost starting from scratch. So it was, this project is a massive first step towards working on something local for our residents. A lot of information was collected so that any future project is really made for our residents and not made for, you know, another municipality. So thank you, Janice, for all of that.
Sure.
Hard work. She's, you know, really drove this project. She knows her programs and she really showed it throughout this project. You know, as we met with utilities and quoting different legislations on the phone call.
And you were like,
yeah. No, it's been great. So we're really happy where this project is at this point. Again, this is a feasibility study, so you know we're not deciding on on all of the details at this point, right? We're trying to understand really what's available to us, and this is really what we have as a product here. If we go forward into the next phase, we'll be back to this group with those details, right? And presenting it to this group. So thank you, Janice, and thank you all for your comments throughout this project. It's been really valuable. So we hope to hear more comments as we go through this process.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, Janice, thank you. Obviously, since we last met, considerable work has been done, you know, from February. So you can really see how the comments from previous have been implemented into this. I can't imagine how you are going to present this to council in 10 minutes.
they're not getting nearly as much information as you folks.
It's really the proverbial reach, which is good, right? Because I think that this is really good. But just echoing Natalie, you really know your stuff, right? And I don't think that there was any question that you were stymied by. So thank you to everyone on the committee and for your very thoughtful questions, and for staff and Councillor Carabin. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put the motion on the floor, and so that and so we've done things a little differently as opposed to questions at the end, but as we went along, and I think that's actually really served the discussion in terms of a free flow of information particularly well. So it really worked out. So we're putting the resolution on the floor that the memorandum regarding the home energy retrofit program feasibility study update be received, and 2, that this committee, that the Environmental Advisory Committee comments that we gathered regarding home energy retrofit program feasibility study update be received and referred to staff for consideration for further action as appropriate. Can I have a mover, please? Oh, Ally, all right. And Jason, yes, sir. Yeah. Jason is the second. All right. Can I see a show of hands? All in favor? I think I got to vote as well too. Any opposed? Okay, and that carries. Again, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Janice. Time well spent actually, and in terms of education, so really good. All right. I don't think we have any informational items, but I have a couple of really quick things for new business just to price the committee up. But does anyone else have something with regard to?
Well, I think one of them was what you were going to bring up.
Did you have another one?
It wasn't, well, I just wanted, I've been away, so I've been on holidays, and I've just caught up on a number of things. Of course, I believe you all have heard that Ford is proposing a whole building goal. Building goal new build to speed up development. And all I'm thinking is I think we should really possibly take a look at that, but how it could be really a slippery slope with respect to the environment, because basically what this bill will do will speed up the development process where developers can come in and probably take cut corners. That's what I'm worried about.
The environmental assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's going to cut corners. And I just want to be able to do, for at least for our community, is if we are able not to stick to what's the policies that we have so that they can't cut the corners. So that's just a sort of a discussional point. I just want to make people aware of that. Thank you.
Anyone else? New business? Okay, I'm just going to do rapid fire here, and these are all related to the work that we do in this committee in terms of the environmental stewards. So the annual cleanup day was held on April 22nd, and I just wanted to do a shout out to all the volunteers and town residents that went out and made sure that our town looked cleaner with all the refuse that was blowing around and so forth. If anyone missed it, there will be a follow-up. So this is actually good news, actually. And that's being held on Saturday, September 27th, and pre-registration is required. As well, there's a curbside giveaway days, 7 in all, and there's 6 remaining. And so all of this can be found on our website. So, actually.
Okay, because it's hard to find things on our
On
website.
there, it's not on the waste stuff, but it's
in the way stuff.
No waste off. Oh, yeah, perfect.
we can share it. That would be good.
Oh, boy.
Regarding the community cleanup day on the 26th, do you know what the numbers were in terms of participation?
I talked about Valley.
I don't have that information, but we can pull it from our operations team.
I was just curious. Seemed like more participation this year than last year, so.
It seems like more participation than last year. Oh, great.
That's good news, yeah.
Great.
And also in terms of when it's collected as well too, right? So that's good. Rain Barrel sale was closed, and apparently that is really great in terms of it serves or is better for plants and gardens, but it saves money by lowering your water consumption. Then e-waste days, these are upcoming, Saturday, May 24th, and again, October 4th, but a great way to divert electronic waste, batteries and the like from landfills. So that is coming up, and it's at our joint operations center. The community garage sale is also coming up June 7th, and that requires pre-registration on Friday, May 30th. And just a couple of more items here. There was a grass fire at the Tomlinson Nature Preserve, and just wanted to do a shout out to first responders, in particular Central York Fire Services, for putting that out fairly quickly. Some of you may have seen that the month of May is No Mow May, and there's a movement behind that in terms of helping pollinators, but how much that actually doesn't benefit the pollinators has come under question by the University of Guelph's Turfgrass Institute, but I think that there is some validity to not mowing your lawn to a certain extent, at least for residential and so town. And then finally, just wanted to mention, this just echoes this, that Bill 5, and you'll see this in the news, and this is why I'm raising this, Protect Ontario by Unleashing Our Economy Act 2025, has the following effects potentially. Either amending or repealing outright the A, Endangered Species Act, B, the Environmental Assessment Act, and C, the Species Conservation Act. So this may be relevant to development in Aurora, particularly around woodlots and water courses. So just wanted to mention that it's not an item for action, but it's just an item really for so that they're, yeah, it's sad, yeah, and it's to create awareness of what's going on. So, so that's all I had for new business. So I think that we can move to adjournment. We're pretty much at time. So thank you for everyone, and thank you for allowing me to chair today's meeting. Hopefully, I did a relatively adequate job. So thank you. So who would like to move that we adjourn? Okay, and second. Yeah, sorry, I'm still not great with still not great with names and stuff. So perfect. Typically, I think that you don't need we can just, but for the sake here, we'll all in favor. We have to. Okay, and so I thought under Robert's we could just okay. And anyone opposed? Anyone wants to stay? No, just and meeting officially adjourned at 2 minutes to 9. So thank you everyone, and safe drive. Enjoy the warm weather.
Thank you.